The 10th of June, 2021. A day just like every other day. I was busy rooting through garbage looking for food, questioning my existence in the cosmos. You know, usual. Then it happened. A moment so spectacular and life-changing it could only be described as divine. That's right, on that day, the gameplay trailer for Elden Ring descended from the heavens and graced us with sublime beauty. Look at it! Look at it! This is the stuff dreams are made of. What poets could only hope to capture a fraction of in their greatest works. Okay, I'm definitely overselling this, but for someone like me who has been suffering from an absence of Souls-like games or games in general that truly grabbed me, it was a beacon to look towards. And one of the main things I noticed, other than the jump, was the combat. And that's when I decided Elden Ring combat is probably going to be the best system of any action game on the market right now. Obviously, people are going to tear into me for saying that. How can you say it's got the best combat? It ain't even out yet. Well, yeah, but look back at the gameplay trailer again. The parts of the actual combat, I need you to look real close. Face against the screen close. Anyone that's played any Soulsborne game will notice something very, very similar about it. You see it? You getting it? Do you need me to spell it out? Fine. It looks like Dark Souls 3 combat, which is an amazing thing, and here's why. Of course, we can't begin talking about the combat without first mentioning the controls. I'll blitz through it all because 1, it's very simple, and 2, Dark Souls 3 and the Soulsborne games do a very good job of tutorializing the basic mechanics, for the most part. All the controls we mentioned are for the Xbox One controller, but they translate one for one to any other standard controller. Keyboard and mouse players are just insane. Right bumper is your light attack, right trigger is heavy, left bumper is your block, and left trigger is your weapon art. We'll get to that later. B while moving in any direction is your dodge or sprint if held, Y switches to a two-handed stance, X uses slotted items, left stick controls, you know what, I won't insult your intelligence with what the sticks do, that's basically universal. Congrats, you now know the basics of CQC. Dark Souls 3 gameplay. From there are a few little things like the rolling attack, LB out of the roll animation, the kicking and jumping attack, LB or LT, and pushing forward on the left stick at the same time respectively. But again, this is all covered in the tutorial messages, and you can beat the entire game with just that information. Sprinkle in reaction time, and a dash of situational awareness, and no enemy can stand in your way. It's very simple, and while not accessible in the current sense of the word, it's easy to pick up and understand. And if Elden Ring maintains this simplicity, most people are going to be able to pick it up and play it quasi-competently. But back to Dark Souls 3. The question is, what do you want to use to do it? The land of Lothric is a desolate place, home of man and beast alike, and most of them want you dead, repeatedly if necessary. So you're going to need to gear up if you want to survive. Lucky for you, there are plenty of tools at your disposal, and you'll surely be able to find something that strikes your fancy. Just not bows. Ignore bows. And these ones. I found them dumpster diving for discarded takeout, and even I wouldn't use them. I have some standards. Where was I? Oh yes, murder. Now, there are various different weapon types with their own advantages and disadvantages. Daggers and fists are fast and nimble, but typically lack in the damage department outside of riposts. But we'll get to that. And the murky hand scythe. Ultras are all about hitting the thing really, really hard for crazy damage, but are slow, heavy, and have some really high stat requirements before you can even swing the damned things. Curved swords are geared more towards AoE and crowd control, mostly with fast horizontal swings, though they don't trade very well against larger, poisier weapons like the previously mentioned Ultras. But we'll get to that. Katanas have similar use cases to the curved swords, but have a little bit more versatility due to the hold weapon art most of them share. But we'll get to that. Axes and maces are generally on the slower side, with comparatively shorter ranges than other classes, but they more than make up for it by being solid trading tools, especially maces. Thrust swords and spears are all about the reach, and allow for attacking at greater range and even from behind a shield. However, they are much more susceptible to being parried than most other weapon types. The halberd is the spear's more multi-purpose cousin that fuses the reach of a spear with the swing of an axe. The class has possibly the largest weapon art variety of any other weapon type. However, their attacks are slow and predictable, so can struggle against a fast or knowledgeable opponent. Whips are all about area denial. Due to their long range and large AoE weapon art, they're also the only weapons in the game that cannot be parried, but they can't riposte or backstab either. Scythes, or reapers as the game terms them, are another reach weapon in the arsenal, capable of even sneaking around an opponent's shield. However, they require very precise spacing to use them to their fullest. Straight swords and great swords are designed to be the jack of all trades weapons, not really excelling at anything, but being average at everything, with the greatsword being typically slower but with more reach. However, in practice that's not really the case, but we'll, say it with me now, get to that. Finally, we have the spell catalysts. On their own they don't do much, however they enable the use of pyromancies, sorceries and miracles. Pyros and miracles are designed around rage combat as well as other numerous buffs and supportive effects, with pyros being more skewed towards damage and miracles are more of a support focused role. Sorceries, while having some rather odd supportive tools, lean heavily into damage, with a vast array of long range artillery and area denial spells and even a few melee spells if you're feeling brave enough. All magic is actually really powerful. The downside is that it costs FP or focus points, this blue bar right here, which doesn't passively regen like stamina, so heavy caster builds have to sacrifice healing for Ashen Estus. Now, how does this whistle stop tour tie into Elden Ring? Well, unless you just can't stand the base gameplay of the Souls games, you will be able to find something from the various weapon types that fit your personal playstyle. Just please, not these ones. Dear Lord, what were they thinking? But it's not as simple as just which weapon feels good. It's also about... Most weapons are good on their own, but they can be better. And that's where the weapon art comes in. For the most part, weapon arts accentuate the existing strengths of the weapon, typically in a brief but powerful attack or buff. While there is some deviation and some super questionable choices, the weapon arts go as follows. Hammers and maces. I'm invincible! Not really, but perseverance does grant you damage reduction and passive poise for a time. Ultra greatswords. Make the big steppy and swing for the cheap seats. Spears. Literally sprint full tilt at the guy you just really want to stab. Whips. Kinky BDSM stuff. A lot of range, a lot of AoE. Reapers. You should have gone for the head. Katanas. Some weeb stuff. Parry or sweep, length of the blade may vary. Curved swords. Let's try spinning. That's a neat trick. Daggers. The closest thing to a dodge build this game has. Axes. Get mad! I don't want your damn lemon! Staves make sorceries saucier. Chimes and talismans. Chimes give you a little tinkle of healing. Talismans means you started, so you'll finish. Halberds. Pretty much every other weapon art out there. It's a grab bag, honestly. Straight swords and great swords. I have nothing clever to say here. It's a katana. Instead of parry or sweep, it's guard break or poise thrust through everything. Then there's the wonderful world of shields. Shields primarily have 3 different weapon arts, but because Bash is completely sodding garbage, we'll just have the parry and weapon skill. Weapon skill is pretty simple. It lets you use the weapon art of the right hand weapon without two-handing it. I should probably have mentioned that sooner. You need to two-hand a weapon to use its weapon art. Anyways, weapon skill. Pretty handy for the sneaky weapon art. Parrying is pretty self-explanatory. You parry an attack at the exact right moment. No, not like that. No, try again. There we go. And opens them up to be riposted for a lot of damage. All in all, weapon arts add a new dimension to Souls combat without feeling gimmicky. Now, the reason this needs to be brought up is that they've already said there'll be a similar system in Elden Ring, but with one wonderful caveat. You can swap out the weapon art or skill or whatever they're calling it to something that better suits the weapon or your playstyle. You probably won't get anything crazy like a great axe with the spin of a curved sword, but imagine a halberd with a stance, or an ultra great sword with the war cry or perseverance. It could be completely bonkers and I love it. Now that we've covered the basics of the game, you'd think that would be it. Haha, wrong. Sit your ass back down, school ain't over. Because Dark Souls has this delightful little thing called PvP. See that ominous red mass in the distance? That's an invader, and he wants to kill you and eat your liver, probably. So you'll need more than just your basics if you want to survive and eat their livers instead. So you got your basic controls and some fancy tricks. How do we make it spicy? It's going to take a bit of mechanical know-how, but you can pull off some pretty solid moves. For example, so this one isn't much of a trick, but it does add some depth to PvP combat outside of just wildly swinging your sword like a dingus. Believe it or not, Dark Souls 3 has a poise system, but it's actually active rather than passive as it was in the earlier games. Essentially, based on your poise stat from your armor and rings, at certain breakpoints you are able to power through or hyper armor an attack while you attack, meaning you're more likely to win a trade as you can do a follow-up attack when your opponent can't. Just worth noting that poise breakpoints are different from different weapon types. Smaller weapons require higher poise, while larger heavy weapons need a smaller amount. What you will learn quickly if you do end up PvPing is that most weapons have a 2-hit combo, in which hitting the first light attack will guarantee a second light hit. Afterwards, your opponent is freed up to block or roll out of the next attack. However, there's a little trick someone figured out. For the sake of time and humour, let's call them Greg. Greg discovered that with certain weapons, you could swap out the second hit for a stronger attack, or even thread other attacks in between the 2 hits for a rather absurd amount of damage. I've had a few examples showing on screen, so hopefully you can get the gist of the concept. You could even do it with 2 separate weapons if you're feeling saucy. These are a little more situational and typically require people to not know it's coming, but they are pretty solid nonetheless. You see, parrying on reaction in Dark Souls 3 can be tricky. This makes things easier. What you'll notice is less experienced players will pretty consistently go for the second light attack. If you block the first attack and then parry directly after the first swing ends, the second attack will be parried for that sweet, sweet riposte damage. The Barker bomb bait, so named after the Adam Barker, follows a similar premise. If you throw a bomb at an enemy, they will most likely roll to avoid it, and if they're an aggressive little noodle, they will roll at you for a rolling attack. And if they do, you can pretty much parry after the throw animation and catch them. Simple, effective, and kinda cool, honestly. Okay, this is really simple but hilariously effective. Gravity is the most dangerous force in Dark Souls. It has claimed many a player because of all the verticality and bottomless death pits all over the series. All you have to do is use a talisman and poise cast force, and people will just fall to their deaths, which is both sad and hilarious. Again, simple but effective. When players get hit, it's instinctual to roll out of range. However, if you light attack at the right time, you can catch them coming out of the roll. It's a lot easier on some weapons than others, but if you can time it right, it can lead to some hilarious moments where your opponent kills themselves by trying to get to safety. It's wild. There are plenty of other cool techniques, but I will say this right now, my ability to PvP is mediocre at best. I know what stuff does, but executing it is more of an issue. If you want some good examples of how deep PvP can go, watch Chase the Bro or Lost My Sanity. They know their stuff, even if Lost is a bit eccentric. Now, I think it's self-explanatory why this translating into Elden Ring is really damned good. Dark Souls combat is boiled down to the most basic components, 4 buttons. And from those 4 buttons, you can get some really fancy and devastating techniques, and this is from a 5-year-old game. Imagine that in a new engine, with all the other things I've mentioned above, and just think about how crazy it'll get. Also, the game has a jump button. A jump button. Boom. There's my meandering video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like. I really need the validation of strangers online. Sorry. Anywho, I have been the Resident Gremlin, and there's some bin food with my name on it. Until next time. Come here, you delicious bastard.